We acknowledge and respect the first humans of the unceded land we call San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We condemn the genocide of these and other tribes across the Western Hemisphere. We honor their legacy and history, and we support rematriation and sovereignty efforts. Hello, and welcome to Storied San Francisco. I'm your host, Jeff Hunt. This episode is a continuation of my chat with Celia Gonzalez of Other Avenues Grocery Cooperative. As I mentioned in the intro to part 1, this talk I had with Celia is one of my favorites in the 5 years we've been doing this podcast. We've wrapped up recording with 2 other co-ops in the meantime, and those conversations were inspiring as hell too. More on that later. Quick note that next week's episode will be all about Giving Tuesday. I'll be solo for that, talking about some ideas for how we can all contribute to making San Francisco, the Bay Area, and really the whole world a better place. If you missed part 1 with Other Avenues, please go back and have a listen. For now, here's Celia.
Food systems, food sovereignty, for me are just really my life's focus. Just
awesome.
Because,
I found the right person. Yes.
I will talk about this all day. Right. For me, exactly what the person at Alameda Farm said, food, everyone eats food. And food comes from the land and the sea. And so in being connected to our food, we are connecting with the land, connecting with the oceans. And
that old planet Earth that won't go away.
Yeah, and that's something that I think, through processes of colonization, and imperialist aims, we've lost touch. Well, a lot of people, not everyone.
Capitalism as well.
Yeah.
Right. It's right. These systems.
These economic systems, these systems that are dehumanizing for everybody,
And destructive.
Indestructive. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so just being in touch with our food really, I think, heals a lot of what we need to heal within ourselves. With sometimes, there's, we're struggling with a lot of mental health challenges. We're struggling with a lot of, just basic needs, and understanding that food is a human right, water is a human right. Well, it's just a right for all life. You know what I mean? That we can solve all the other social inequities because they all stem to to these basic needs and relationship with land. So I really a really vibe with Via Campesina and their definition of food sovereignty being the right of all people to to steward the land in an ecological way, to have the decision around how food is cultivated culturally appropriately and ecologically. And part of that is also how food is distributed, right?
Huge part of it.
Yeah. And that's kind of the things where we have to get into, and looking also the quality of our soil, how are we producing food in a way that people, and the soil, and all of the ecological systems that are connected are thriving. And we know how to do it. Humans
we wouldn't be here if we didn't. Literally.
And so it's sad to see our governing bodies, be swooped by these corporate solution or they're not solutions. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
When the real wisdom, is already within the people that have been stewarding the land.
It's already there. We've already been doing it. Yeah,
right. And I did a workshop, and I think I'll try to do one in April again regenerative farming, agroecology.
Awesome.
identifying like GMOs and, you know, the differences between industrial agriculture and regenerative farming, and why, you know, it's easy to see which one is really there for us and the long term, you know, versus these extractive models, which, you know, translates also, you know, extracting nutrients from the soil, putting chemical, you know, fertilizers, not allowing, you know, the plants to decompose back into the soil, like just no need to till things, you know. That also is like an example of just how we're treating, you know, ourselves, you know, like these extractive profit models where, you know, a co-op, for example, I've heard has an exponential economic growth factor because the people, worker owners, right, we receive the profit at the end of the day and we're spending it in the community,
putting it back,
you know.
Yeah.
Exactly. Whereas like, you know, a Safeway or whatever shareholder owned business is just extracting it out of the community, and then the wealth is leaving.
I mean, it's the regenerative farming model, right? But with money systems.
Exactly.
Yeah. Can I share a story?
Yes, please.
The other night, I got a little bug up my ass and I made a lasagna. It happens every once in a while. I'm just like that. But I was reminded, it wasn't the first time I've made lasagna. I was reminded at the end of, you know, when I sat down to eat, I was like, or actually way earlier in the process, I was like, lasagna is a lot of work. No matter how I don't care if the noodles are like, you know, oven ready or whatever, which I don't, by the way. I don't.
Whatever works.
No, but I realized yet again, it had been a while, and I was like, oh yeah, lasagna is a lot of work. It's a great reward. But then I was like, and I started thinking about like all my ingredients and how detached I am from them. You know, I did go with canned tomatoes, and I'm like, okay, go back to the planting of the tomato, the nourishing and the, you know, the growing of the tomato, the canning process, the distribution,
right,
and then every single ingredient that went into, like, you know, I didn't grow anything that went into my lasagna. And I think that really speaks to how disconnected most of us are from the things that we are putting into our bodies on a multiple times daily basis.
Right.
And what you're speaking to, and sort of what this store stands for, is reconnecting, or at least being aware of those connections, right?
Right. I mean, and doing what we can to, you know, to get closer to them, you know, closer to the source.
Right.
Of course, you know, there's, you know, a need for preserving food. That's like a whole wisdom and skill of like how to preserve food through different seasons and making the resources that we have last, you know. So because there's also the, you know, the myth of food scarcity, right? Like that is just like thrown at us as if, you know, hunger couldn't be solved like this, you know. I mean,
tomorrow,
right?
It could happen.
I mean, I've heard statistics about, you know, there's enough food to feed the world like 3 times over, you know, but what really is the problem is, again, distribution and access, and, you know, in broken systems, well, not broken systems that were never set up, you know,
systems we disagree with
in nature, you know.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and I think locally, you know, there's, you know, rural versus urban as well. There's a divide there that I think needs to be healed as well,
bridged.
You know. And I think we can be doing a lot more in our urban centers to be closer to our food. You know, Alamany Farm is a beautiful example, you know, and I love the way it's set up. Anybody can go harvest food and you take, you know, a little some home with you, you know. That's beautiful. We should have more of those opportunities. We should have more you know, just like, I mean, I was in New York, and they had lettuce and kale as like their little planter stuff, you know?
Around the city?
Or, yeah.
Okay, because Christopher Renfro from Alamany Farm also talks frequently, and he talked about it on the podcast, that enormous plot of land in San Francisco, Golden Gate Park, we could be doing so much more with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's brilliant.
And it also, it's not like, oh, it's a farm, it's like there's people who are going to enjoy that space and be there and, and do community events. Like you're not taking away anything by transforming land into, a way that people are able to steward it together, commit to native species, think about the relationship that you have with the ecology, right? Because sometimes, humans are talked about as this like, problem, but really we are an animal within the ecosystem, and we do have a role to play in balancing, and so I think people need to think about like, what is that, and how do we show up for the ecology, and for each other in a community,
Yeah.
And so a lot of that is like tied to just cooperative thinking, it's like we need each other. We're not like, this capitalist system makes us think that anyone can survive on their own, if they just work hard, but that's not the truth. And we've learned that time and time again, like we've evolved, our brains are wired to have each other, to support each other.
Social animals.
Yeah.
We are.
Right. Yeah.
Communal animals.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, so, like the more that we could do in our urban centers, growing food, growing, fruit trees, they can be messy, but we can teach each other how, to do that, have more, chickens if people, like
bees.
Bees. Yeah. I mean, I am so excited by how many local beekeepers, we have local honey from like Noe Valley, Potrero Hill,
nice.
Stern Grove,
nice.
like it's very local. And it's delicious. So
it's good for allergies too.
Yeah, they say, but I've also heard conflicting information that's just a scam from a beekeeper. So
am I mainlining honey?
I think it just comes down to there's also like traditional practices that people have done. Maybe there isn't like a lot of science behind it, but it's one of those community
I'm going to keep going because also honey is delicious.
It is delicious. Yeah. That's enough.
Yes. Is there anything that we're kind of missing? I've sort of run out of curiosity directly, but and I can cut that out.
No. Yeah. I'm thinking. I mean, so yeah. I guess you're here talking to me.
Yes.
Other Avenues. We've been here like 50 years, but almost 50 years, and we need to celebrate that. But there's also really exciting, new co-ops that are forming. I'm really excited in the East Bay by the Deep East Oakland Empowering People co-op that they're trying to set up in, in a place that is like food apartheid, And so while we celebrate co-ops and co-ops have been around, we also need to look and support new co-ops and really understand why, the more worker-owned co-ops that exist, and consumer co-ops are also great, but I'm definitely behind worker-owned co-ops just because of how, you have more of a say, in the system around you. And there's hybrid models as well, if you explored, which are great. Right. But yeah, so we need to really support those new initiatives.
Lift each other up.
Exactly, because that's what cooperative,
and going against the sort of competition model of the ugly C word.
Right, because honestly, the more that we uplift each other, the more that we're more secure, And even like Augusta's is down the street. They're definitely our competitor, but they're family owned, and people love them, and they offer different things, and we work it out. It's way better that it's not like Safeway, or something.
Correct.
So that's also exciting.
That is, and thank you for mentioning that, because I just remembered a couple of other things, which was, what other food opportunities, what's the word I'm looking for, grocery stores, food stores, are around here, and I guess Gus's is one.
Yeah, Gus. I mean, Safeway is around.
Yeah.
Well, you know, like there's the Trader Joe's and the new Whole Foods at Stonestown.
There's both?
Yeah, they opened a Whole Foods there. And
Okay.
that also, like, our sales went down a little, but it's also hard to know if it was like that or the pandemic.
Right.
Or all the restaurants opening up, because I definitely was like, yes, restaurants again.
Right.
But it's hard to really know, you know. But we're doing fine. It's just like really great year pandemic, and then whoop that was the rubber band effect. You know,
that's the other thing I wanted to talk about was how you guys weathered the how you all weathered the pandemic.
Well, yeah, it was definitely, you know, unexpected, of course, and we did our best. We stayed open, so we never closed.
Essential? Did you were you allowed because it's
essential,
a food?
Yeah,
right,
we were
okay.
definitely an essential business. There was I think the biggest challenge was just like trying to keep up with all of these like random kind of like rules, you know, that were changing and fluctuating, and so how then to like communicate with the customers, you know, about what they were expected to do. I think limiting capacity in the store, you know, we had to get like some door people to help regulate the flow, because we were only letting in like, you know, 8 to 12 people at a time. So just, I think, communicating with people, and like at first I think there was some frustration, you know, like just how your shopping habits are disrupted, and that was a challenge for everyone, you know. You know, the mask requirement, of course. I'm sure if you hear from a lot of, you know, folks there. I think the challenge really just like being the like health police or whatever was a weird role to play on top of the many other roles that we play that maybe don't seem like we play. And I think also like a big impact is like, you know, we're a community grocery store, and a lot of people, you know, shop here, and so for some people it's like they, you know, get their groceries and they go on with their day, but for a lot of other people, like this is a place where they're socializing, you know,
they're
like
a meeting point.
Maybe they're not, you know, very mobile, and this is like their, you know, trip of the day, you know, and so I think a lot of retail workers probably would agree that we play more than just, you know, you're a grocer.
Right,
like,
right.
There's a lot of like mental health, you know, kind of aspects to it, you know, which I enjoy. I very much enjoy. And can be challenging as well, you know.
Sure.
And so I think during the pandemic that kind of really grinded down a little bit on that, and people extremely isolated if they weren't already, you know, and not seeing anyone, you know, and then these like interactions at the grocery store, you know, but also are limited because everyone's just going to the grocery store. So we're trying to like manage the people in the store, get them in and get them out, you know, but also still uphold the kind of like space that a community grocery store has to offer. So I think that was a big challenge, and, you know, definitely was interesting to see. And I mean, also personally, just as a retail worker, like, you know, a lot of other people in their experience of the pandemic versus mine, where, you know, I just continued working and worked like even more, you know what I mean? And just how like my social interactions, I think, were impacted, you know, where it's like all these short, you know, interactions where I'm not able to get as deep, which are also already limited just in general, you know.
Right. But when that's all you have.
And that's, you know. And so then it's like, man, I just want to talk to somebody, not like, hey, how are you? Like, this is the price of what you rang up.
Yeah.
You know?
And
but then also, what do I talk about? Because that's all
we'll talk about the pandemic.
You know, I'm sure people can relate in a different way. But I think that was a challenge. But also it was really great to be in a worker-owned situation, because we had the ability to meet and be flexible, to pivot and respond to, you know, to be able to, you know, meet the needs of the moment and evaluate and be like, is this working? This is not working, and doing a lot of shifts. So we were meeting a lot more too. And we always, every meeting checked in about the pandemic. How are we doing things? I think, you know, people fluctuating on the mask requirement was challenging as people get used to it, then they don't, and then it was back, so I think that was hard, just dealing with people. Some people had to be asked to not to shop here.
Oh, right, okay.
Which I think was sad, because we don't want to do that,
So I think
attention.
In summary, challenging, you would say.
Yeah. But grateful that we had the kind of ability to work through things, and not have to put in requests that take too long to come down. Just having the group to be able to decide on the spot,
And Other Avenues never closed?
We did not. I think, just when there was that silly curfew or whatever,
right,
we closed
at first,
early,
right,
which did not make any sense to me. I mean, that's also some things where it's well, if the idea was to spread people apart, then the later that a business could be open would allow people to
in a staggered fashion.
Yeah, people who like to shop at night, later. or even I was hearing, nurses who were impacted because they're at work also until the end, and then they have just a smaller window to get their groceries. So, I think some reflection hopefully would be to, try to talk to the community, and make decisions, but check in about them quickly after to see what's working. We can also be insightful, on these issues.
Anything coming up for Other Avenues that you'd like to plug here?
Right. Yeah, well, we just came out of Co-op Month, which was October.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Acknowledge that.
Now October.
Every October from now on.
National Co-op Month.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so we had some fun activities. I guess, I would just say tune to the events that we're doing. I think we're doing... there's a flyer outside of exactly what day, but I think we're doing a chutney workshop with Shanta. And I'm going to be doing a workshop in April around agroecology and food systems.
Well, I think this was intentional for us that these episodes around for you guys and the other episodes on co-ops are coming at a time of year. We have this thing we call Thanksgiving. We have this thing we call the holidays and Christmas and this and that and blah, 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 blah. And the traditional thinking behind some of those things is community, family, food is a huge part of it. So I think the intention for us is to highlight businesses like this and other co-ops, to sort of ask people to rethink these things and what we're actually celebrating.
For real,
right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and we actually are open. The only days that we fully close at Other Avenues are May 1st in celebration of International Workers' Day and Martin Luther King Day.
Okay.
Which is a radical, if you look at the radicalness of Martin Luther King in his, intentions to shift the way that the economy works and for who it serves, So those 2 days we vibe with, and we take the day off. Otherwise, we have some shortened hours for some other, federally recognized holidays, but we're open.
That's it for our episode with Other Avenues Grocery Cooperative. Next Tuesday will be a special Giving Tuesday episode. Please join us for that, and have a lovely week and weekend. Music for Storied San Francisco was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Michelle Kilfeather does original photography for us. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 5th season, we have more than 200 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're able to, please rate and review the show. And drop us a line at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Stay strong, weird, and healthy. And we'll see you next time on Storied San Francisco.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcast.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.